السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. كعادتنا بنلتقي بالشخصيات بالغة الأهمية التي تقوم بزيارة لمصر أو نذهب لزيارتها، من الشخصيات المؤثرة في مجتمعاتها فيما يتعلق بقضايا الشرق الأوسط وما يتعلق بمصر. اليوم وفي ظل زيارة من عدد كبير من المسؤولين البريطانيين المتواجدين لإنشاء مدرسة جديدة، ولكن يبدو أن هذه الزيارة عالية المستوى، حيث يشارك فيها أيضا أحد رؤساء الوزراء السابقين لبريطانيا توني بلير، ويشارك أيضا عدد كبير من المتحدثين ومن الأعضاء سواء في الحكومة الحالية أو في الحكومة السابقة أو ممثلين برلمانيين ممن يدعمون مصر. اسمحوا لي أن أنا أرحب بضيوفي بارونس هوبر، وهي نائب رئيس مجلس اللوردات البريطاني. Most welcome.
Thank you.
وأرحب بالسيد جون سبيلر، وهو نائب المتحدث لحزب العمال البريطاني للشؤون الخارجية. Most welcome. والصديق العزيز بوب والترز في لقائي الثالث معه، وهو الذي يترأس المجموعة التي تدعم مصر في البرلمان البريطاني. It's good to have you again.
Thank you.
Let me start by asking you about, now we're establishing a school here, and that means that there is something that is happening in terms of rebuilding relations. I've graduated personally from a former British school in Egypt, in Alexandria.
The Victoria.
The Victoria. Mm-hmm. And that was established back in 1906. Mm-hmm. So now it's 1914, that's more than a century later. What does that mean? Does this mean more interest on the Egyptian side, or is it on the British side?
Well, I hope it's on both sides. I take a great interest in education because I think particularly in international relations, it's very important for young people to have opportunities to get to know another country. So I'm a firm believer in educational exchange programs. But of course, here in Egypt, we, as you mentioned, have a long-standing relationship because of the Victoria School in Alexandria. And I believe the work of the British Council since the 1930s, when they established a school which is still going strong and I think is the largest, certainly English-speaking school in Heliopolis today. We've recently, certainly it is on both sides the interest, because we've recently announced a program of scientific and research funding specifically for Egypt, and I think that makes it one of the most highly funded countries in the world in terms of these types of exchange scholarships.
So we've announced a program for scientific research specifically for Egypt. We as the government, or we as the House of Lords, or we as the British Council?
We as the government, but the British Council will help to operate the scheme, and we hope to receive many young people from Egypt in England at our various England, Scotland and Wales at our various universities. But of course today marks the signing of the agreement to form a new British school here in Cairo, and that's a very exciting project because it's harnessing the ethos and the experience of Malvern College, which has other overseas schools as well, to the needs of Egyptian young people.
And we've always said, I mean, we have a so-called British university, but that does not mean that it is part of a British university. Will this be followed, you believe, with a British university? One of the British universities would be opening a branch here in the near future?
Well, who knows? I understand there are some new universities which are opening, which are English-speaking universities, and it may well be that an established British university will also see the potential for working here, and I will certainly, when I get back home, do all I can to encourage that.
Great. Okay, Mr. Spiller, I mean, Is it your first visit to Cairo?
It is indeed.
It is.
Yes.
I mean, you've been working within the Labour Party and the past government. You've been working on foreign affairs and the different issues. How do you see Egypt from the opposition's point of view?
Well, I think in this, in many ways, the opposition and the government will have a similar view. But I think Egypt is absolutely crucial to the future development of the region, and indeed right the way through the Middle East and North Africa, because at the moment, you know better than we do, the life and death struggle that's taking place with Islamist terrorism, with Daesh, and the battle that's taking place, the number of lives it's claiming here in Egypt, but particularly elsewhere in Syria and Iraq. And Egypt being
and Libya now,
and Libya as well, and Egypt being the biggest country, but also with a significant leadership role within the Arab world, is an absolutely crucial battleground. They see it as that, and so do we.
All right, but I mean, having said that, and you were the Minister of the Armed Forces at a certain stage, and that means that there must be a stronger military cooperation that should be happening between not only Britain, but the UK and countries of the region. With the chaos that is happening right now, and not knowing which party to arm and which party not to arm, like for example Syria, there is this dilemma of who to arm. How do you see it in this perspective? How can the UK play a more active role in siding with the good people?
But I think that has been evolving anyway, and you can see that in Syria, where ourselves and other countries, and including countries from within the region, are playing a much more active role in support of the forces that are opposed both to Assad but also to ISIS, and providing military capability, air attacks, in order to and indeed have prevented some of the advances. And it's evolving in terms of supplying arms. There's a real dilemma in some of this, because some of the arms that have been supplied have then ended up being captured or diverted to those other groups. But I think you're seeing that evolution of policy. I think there is a real concern that Turkey needs to provide more support for the
Is Turkey providing any support?
Well, Turkey has actually sort of been allowing free passage for some of the Kurdish fighters there. Has modified its position, but I think there is a need for a recognition of what is the greatest danger. There are various other disagreements, arguments, and sometimes some long-standing grievances that are there, but at the same time, Turkey and everyone else in region and elsewhere in the world needs to recognize the major danger, which is the rise of this terrorist Islamist fundamentalist group.
And you would be surprised that NATO member Turkey is not really seeing eye to eye with the rest of NATO.
Well, and there have been a lot of discussions there. For example, it would be much easier to mount air attacks from Turkey than coming across from the Gulf. But there has been some movement, and there are intense dialogue taking place. This has never been a straightforward situation, but there is, and I said that there are a number of complicating factors, not least the long history of PKK terrorism in Turkey. But there needs to be a recognition of the greater danger. That I believe that Egypt has recognised that very strongly and is playing a leading role in combating that. And for that reason, but also because of its historic role in the region, Egypt is the future of Egypt and the evolution of the democratic solution in Egypt, which we're very pleased to have had discussions about today, is that Egypt will play this vital role in the evolution, the positive evolution of this region.
Right. Mr. Waters, now, I mean, it's been 6 months since we met last time. I believe it's exactly 6 months.
Yes, it was in June. That's
in
exactly
June.
Right.
I guess it was again the 13th of June or something of the sort.
Very similar.
So how do you see the progress that has happened? I mean, it's been only a few hours that you've been in Cairo,
Sure.
but I mean, you've been following, I'm sure, what's happening along the 6 months. How do you see the progress or development? Has it been fast enough to your expectations, or not so fast, or not at all?
Well, there's certainly been progress, and I have, in our last interview, said that I wanted Egypt to move as swiftly as possible to full parliamentary elections, to having a parliament in place, and then Egypt can take its place alongside the other democracies of the world and be able to, I think, play a leading role. So there has been progress, and I know that in the last day or so there's been the announcement now of the parliamentary constituencies for the elections, and I think we fully anticipate that by the end of March that those elections will have taken place and Egypt will have a fully functioning parliament. So on a domestic line, I think progress has been made, maybe not quite as fast as some might have hoped, but nonetheless it's been made. I think in the international arena, what has struck me in the last couple of months is the role that Egypt is now playing in the region. And particularly with regard to the situation in between Israel and Palestine. Egypt is very much now operating as a strong broker between the various parties there. I was in Ramallah and Jerusalem just 2 weeks ago, and the name of Egypt kept cropping up, and President Abbas flew to Cairo that very weekend to meet with Arab League foreign ministers. So Egypt is now playing a key role in the region, and I think that will only increase.
One day before that meeting that President Abbas had with the Arab League, I was interviewing him, and he was telling me that he is depending on Egypt, together with a number of the Arab countries, in order that when they're going to present the paper to the United Nations for a recognition of a solution of the two-state solution based on East Jerusalem being the capital of a Palestinian state and so on, and they are different parliaments have moved along that in order to support, like the French, like the Danish, and so on. How does the British Parliament perceive that request? Are we going to hear soon about a petition in order to support that kind of solution, as we saw?
Well, the British Parliament, or the House of Commons, passed a motion some 3 or 4 weeks ago in which it urged the government to recognise the state of Palestine as a full member of the United Nations. And in fact, there were only 12 votes against in that particular debate. The government has not yet gone in that direction, but I think it sent a very strong signal that the view of the House of Commons was that Palestine should take its place as a fully fledged member of the United Nations. And I think that will strengthen the hand of the Palestinians in their negotiations with Israel.
And what's the position of the Labour Party in that case?
Well, that was the position of the
position.
Labour Party, and indeed our spokesman spoke in support of that resolution. And at the same time, we recognise the enormous importance of getting talks started again. We just hope that on this occasion, the further efforts of John Kerry, who put in prodigious efforts before, and then that got frustrated at the last minute. I'm very pleased to see that he's been in the region again and talking to various leaders, and I think that's really encouraging if we can then get those talks, because everyone recognises the only real answer here is a viable two-state solution, living alongside each other in peace, and actually focusing on economic development for the peoples of both of those countries, and that is what really offers hope and a future for the Palestinians.
I mean, how do you see all this big fat mess that we're having in the Middle East? I mean, especially that one statement I really don't like calling the Daesh people ISIS, because ISIS is our goddess of life and they are the gods of death. So I mean, when that switched to ISIL, that was okay. But anyways, with all these, with all this fighting that's happening and the blurred vision that we're having within the Middle East, how do you see it? Do you see a way out?
Well, I don't see a rapid way out, and that is why I believe it's very important that we should all work together in cultural terms, in educational terms, and in other terms, so that we can understand the background to the problems and maybe offer advice based on that. I find it very difficult
would you advise the
to
government
say.
to distance itself from all this, the British government?
Well, I mean, the British government shouldn't do anything that is unwelcome on the ground. We can obviously, we're known to have certain values, to have a democratic tradition, and that is something that we advocate in every country in the world. And in the future, for the future of the Middle East, it is going to be very important to have established clear democratic processes and democratic representation, because it was very clear as it came out of the whole movement of the so-called Arab Spring that young people want something different for the future.
Young people everywhere in the world want something different.
Exactly. But it was very evident here.
Course.
And we're seeing the consequences of that, and that's why we are all working in whatever way we can. And again, the relations between parliaments, and that's why, again, we're looking forward to having an established parliament, here, a re-established parliament here, so that we can continue in having relations and pushing things forward.
But
And
we
you-
can't detach ourselves.
Pardon?
We can't detach ourselves from events that are taking place here. Young people from countries in Western Europe are going to fight in Syria, and then they're going back to their own countries.
Maybe this is not the greatest danger. The danger is not in the 3,000 Westerners who have gone to Syria and Iraq, but the problem is with the ones who did not manage to go and they're still staying within your countries, and they become more of a threat because you cannot tell who is who in that case.
And that is a major job for the security services. And one of the reasons why, with support from both sides of Parliament, there is a new counter-terrorism bill looking at the increased or the new risks that have emerged from the internet, from social media, and the ability therefore to counter that. And what that also requires then is international cooperation, and that's not just between the UK and United States or UK and Europe. That is between all the countries that stand for those values against the nihilist values, the destructive values of groups such as Daesh.
Weren't you worried when they told you come to Cairo, where the British Embassy had closed down its doors, and you said, I mean, why are you letting us come to Cairo when the British Embassy closes down?
The British Embassy just has a particular local problem. Indeed, we had some discussions today with the Foreign Ministry, and we certainly hope that there's a solution to this. And I think we've made some further progress in terms of that. That's more about the geography of the British Embassy rather than the general security environment. And I have to say, we've been very well received here.
Can I just emphasise the British Embassy is not closed. The British Embassy is functioning. There is a part of the building of which there is a perceived security threat, and we're just in the process of dealing with that. But it has meant that some of the public access to the building has been restricted or stopped.
May I understand what does dealing mean?
Well, there are discussions that we were involved with. I can't go into the details, between the ambassador and the foreign minister this morning. We discussed it, and I think there's, we are very close to an agreement whereby the necessary measures will be in place, and the building can be fully functioning again.
And it's only been done for the safety of the people who work inside the building.
And this is not the consular department, because the consular department is in a completely different building in a completely different district,
Yes.
in somewhere else where it's a company
And it's still
that
going.
very efficiently works. I mean, I obtain my visas through that company, and it's a very efficient system to tell you the truth. But I mean, the message that came across was Egypt is not safe. This is how it was carried by international media. Maybe, as you said, it's a logistic issue. Maybe it's something that deals with the geography, as you said. But the message led, as far as I understand, if I'm right, to some tourism cancellations right before New Year's Eve and Christmas.
Well, that shouldn't be the case, because we haven't. Not only have we not changed our travel advice for Cairo and the other regions, we've actually increased the number of parts of regions in Egypt where we say it is green to go. And I spoke only a couple of days ago to our minister responsible for the Middle East, and he's anticipating that there will be twice as many British tourists in Egypt next year as there were this year.
And he's bringing a substantial trade delegation shortly, isn't he, Rob, as well?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
January.
And on our flight out, I have to say the flight was completely full. So
Flight out to Cairo or flight out to London?
out to Cairo. I'll let you know on the return flight.
Okay, but I mean, we're happy so far with the flight inbound to Cairo that it was full. But I hope also that it was not full of Egyptians. It was as many Egyptians as many as yeah. Okay, let me just go back to the idea of the APPG, because this has always been a fascinating idea, especially to me, and how you, ladies and gentlemen, there, you've been really doing us a great favor in terms of the effort you've done, and I'm sure you're looking at it from the perspective of what's in the interest of the British people in the first place. But I mean, when we see it and you say you've done us justice in this unjust world, I mean, it becomes quite a favor. So how has the progress been happening in this respect?
Well, what we have done in the all-party group is to try and ensure that as many members of Parliament are aware of the situation here in Egypt. We try and put people right when they say, but it's a military dictatorship, or you know, there's a military president, and so on. You know, the man was elected. President Sisi was elected with a significant public support, and Egypt is on the path to parliamentary elections. So we want to get that message across. But we also want to enhance the bilateral relationship. We're here this evening. There will be the inauguration of a new British school here in Cairo, so the educational links. As we've just mentioned, there's going to be a trade mission, major trade mission, high-level trade mission, coming here to Egypt in January. The United Kingdom is, I think, the largest foreign direct investor in Egypt at the present time, and there are opportunities for more direct investment to come. BP announced only yesterday that it's investing $12 billion over the next 5 years in the oil and gas industry. So those are the points that, you know, it's a partnership between Parliament, between civil society and industry.
Certainly.
In building that bilateral relationship or rebuilding it, because there's always been a good bilateral relationship with Egypt, but we'd like it to be even better.
$12 billion going into gas excavations in Egypt. Oil prices are going down, and it's an illogical way that it's happening. It's not really logical that oil rates would go down so much in winter. And that's because of, what do you think? Because of what? Why have oil prices plunged so far?
Well, I think a combination of factors. I think that there has been a tail off in demand. We have shale gas coming on stream in the United States, which means that the United States is now once again self-sufficient in energy, which is affecting the demand equation. And I think that Saudi Arabia, which used to be at the really at the key point within OPEC, is no longer as strong as it was in order to determine the world price of oil. But a company like BP would be making that kind of investment in the long term.
Of course.
Not as a result of any change in the oil price this winter.
I'm not linking the investment to the prices, but it just brought to me the idea, because I was just speaking today to some friends from Saudi Arabia, and they were saying that it's because of ISIL selling Iraqi petroleum for $25 a barrel or something like that, that this has affected the market badly. Do you see it the same way, or we in the Arab world, we have our own vision of things completely different from yours?
That's a small part, a very small part of the daily production. That I mean, it's important in terms of the financing for ISIL, but in terms of its impact on the world market, it's fairly limited. But there is an economic slowdown taking place. Some very concerning data coming out of China, that's impacted on the world stock markets. As Bob said, the United States is producing not just shale gas but shale oil as well. And so all of these factors are, and also vehicles are becoming more efficient. A huge amount of work's been done by the auto manufacturers in producing more efficient vehicles, and you're seeing many more dual-fueled vehicles, both petroleum and electric. All of that is having a cumulative dampening.
Can I tell you again how the rumor goes? Because maybe you could correct that. They say the cost for excavating oil in Russia is $68 a barrel, and this is why it was pushed down, as in a way, in order to punish Russia, down to 65, so that their oil would be of no use.
Well, there's a long-term impact on where people invest, and there is an argument that says that this will make future investment in shale less attractive. Doesn't mean in the very long term, but in the medium term it will be less attractive because of the initial capital investment. But of course, if you've actually already invested in that capital's gone. So it's only your running costs that you do, but it is undoubtedly impacting on Russia, and there is a considerable disagreement, to put it mildly, between Russia and Saudi Arabia about Russia's support for the Assad regime in Syria. But I think there's also
Is it as big as the disagreement between Russia and the rest of the Western world in terms of the Ukraine?
Well, Russia's upsetting a lot of people at the moment in various areas, and there does need to be a future engagement on that with Russia. So I think there are possibly those elements in it, but I think the underlying issue is the question of the revolution in shale, and of course there's a lot of other shale deposits around the world, which, if they were rapidly developed, would have a very significant effect on prices of oil and gas.
And how do you see it, Mr. Waters?
Well, what I was going to say in answer to your so-called rumour that we, as the consumer states in Western Europe and elsewhere, really would love to have that power to be able to force the price of oil down. The only way we can really force it down is by stopping buying oil altogether, and we show no signs of doing that. No, I mean, I think the price of oil has fluctuated historically as economic growth fluctuates historically, and we're going through a dip at the moment. But I'm pretty certain that in a couple of years' time, oil will probably be back over $100 a barrel, and we'll wonder what this conversation was all about.
But it hasn't been over $100 a barrel for very long. I mean, in the long term, if you look at oil prices, I mean, I think back to 1973 when we joined the European community, and oil was $5 a barrel.
But then, I mean, recently, I guess it was $110
Yes.
a few months ago. 110.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
So it plunged very fast. Okay, let's just try and take the positive side of things, because I believe you're here more on to celebrate something that is happening, and accordingly we need to look positively at the world, at the region, at Egypt, at relations between the UK and Egypt. Do you see that the relations between the UK and Egypt will be fostered further, rather than just the wishes? But I mean, yes, we have a trade mission that's coming, but we have an economic conference that's happening also in March, and probably will right before that we would have started at least the parliamentary elections. How do you see the progress that's going to happen along 2015?
Well, I think in addition to the things you've mentioned, we hope very much that we will have a visit from President Sisi to the United Kingdom at some stage.
Has he been invited?
It's always on the carpet. I think that we would like very much for him to make a visit. You have elections here, we have elections coming up in the United Kingdom as well. But I think by reinforcing and pursuing all the opportunities that we have for both cultural, educational and trade relations, that we will push forward on the relationship. And it's certainly something that we want to see. We want to see Egypt as a very important element of the Middle East, our very good friend.
So, I mean, as Baroness Hooper was speaking about President Sisi's visit to the United Kingdom, I was actually asking the Egyptian Foreign Minister 2 weeks ago, and I said the president was just a stone throw away from the United Kingdom when he was in Paris. Maybe it's not that much about stone throw away, but I mean, he could have taken the ferry to the
We can take the train now.
Oh, the train now. Okay. I mean, why wasn't the invitation extended by Mr. Cameron to President Sisi at this stage?
Well, I don't know. It's probably a matter of diaries. But Mr. Cameron has met President Sisi. They met in New York during the United Nations General Assembly. I know that the foreign ministers of both countries meet quite regularly, either in London, and Philip Hammond has been here to Cairo. So the relations are there. I think it's a matter of timing. But I'm reasonably confident that an invitation will be forthcoming in the not too distant future, particularly as we are building this stronger economic link with our trade mission here in January, the investment conference you've talked about, which is taking place in March, where there will be, I think, a strong push by British companies to invest here in Egypt.
Mr. Spiller, let me reverse the question. I mean, Mr. Cameron was here right after the 2011 revolution. It just took him a couple of months to be here. Now it's been a year and a half since our June revolution, and we haven't had that kind of a visit. I mean, are you going to go in Parliament and tell him people in Egypt are asking about you, the opposition? People in Egypt are asking about you. Where are you? Why aren't you there?
I think his answer at the moment will be that he will be focusing on May the 7th, very largely, which is the next general election. And I think...
but you don't want him to focus on the elections. I mean, you want him to be distracted to elsewhere so that you win the election.
We want him to focus on the elections.
But I don't think he'd necessarily take that advice. So I think realistically, we need to be looking a bit later in the year for the British Prime Minister, whoever that is, to be then looking at the crucial importance, as I stressed earlier, for both historical and current and population reasons and cultural reasons. Egypt is a crucial element in the Middle East and Middle East and North Africa, and it is absolutely vital that Egypt succeeds. So quite apart from our joint relations, which are important, it's also very important for us that Egypt succeeds.
One last bit here that I want to discuss, and it's about the presence of the so many radicals within London, within the United Kingdom. I mean, you know the statement that's been made in the press and the media, and they started calling it Londonistan and stuff of the sort. First of all, why has the report that was supposed to be presented by the government about the relations of the MBs to acts of terrorism been delayed? Do you think this is because it's not pleasing the Saudis, as some people say, or because it's not pleasing the terrorists, as others say?
I think it's because they are trying to get to the bottom of it, and don't forget there is a major counter-terrorism operation ongoing inside the United Kingdom. MI5 indeed has been enormously successful. The number of people who have have been arrested and brought to trial and convicted. And the number of plots that have been foiled has been quite remarkable. And that is, by the way, not just the work of our intelligence agencies, it's in cooperation with intelligence agencies around the world who are exchanging information and cooperating much better than they have in the past.
So
and I think it is.
Do you forecast this report to be coming out soon?
I'm not in the mind of the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister on that, but I do accept that that there is a lot of work being undertaken, and I think they are finding out more on a daily and monthly basis, and I think they want to get the most comprehensive report out.
How do you see it?
Well, I agree with John. I think that basically, when this report is published, it has to be a robust and watertight report. The British legal system is such that smart lawyers can dig into the detail of this kind of report, and I think it's better to get it right. And therefore, if we have to wait another few months for that to come out, then I think it's in the interest both of Egypt and of the United Kingdom.
Is it because the rumor goes again that you're worried about 4 million people affiliated to the Muslim Brotherhood would just go and block the streets of London? This is why the report has come out.
That's not an accurate picture of the Muslim population in the United Kingdom. The overwhelming majority of the Muslim population, largely of Pakistani Kashmiri origin, they want nothing to do with terrorism.
But we've seen them on television in the demonstrations of the Muslim Brotherhood in London.
Yes, but how many people does it take to fill a narrow street in London in order to demonstrate? How many of those are actually UK nationals or people who have come from other European countries? When you actually look at a lot of the work that's being undertaken by the security services in undermining and then breaking up terrorist operations, a lot of their information comes from other members of the community. They don't want that. They came to the United Kingdom in order to provide a better life for themselves, and most particularly a better opportunity for their children. And when the voice of, not the voice of those who go on to go on television and get interviewed in the street outside an embassy or whatever, when you actually see how they speak in their own areas, when, for example, there are attempts to take over their local schools by Islamist fundamentalists, it's the parents who turn that back. Parents who've risen up against that. They don't want this sort of thing. So I don't think we should underestimate the resilience, but also the determination of the Muslim community in the United Kingdom to actually play their part in building a safer Britain.
Mm-hmm.
If I moved to Britain and I live in Britain, I would have wanted to move and live in Britain the way the British people live, the way they handle their lives. I wouldn't want to change it. I wouldn't want it to make it look like my home. I've moved there because I want to live the way you live. But still, there's a lot of work that's being done by many people who try to change the way you live in order that it matches the way they live. Do you see it the same way? Do you see it that way?
Well, I mean, like you, if I went to live somewhere else, I wouldn't wish to change that place to make it more like home. I go there because it's different, perhaps. I think the current situation is reflecting the fact that we have become a very multicultural country. If you travel in London, you travel on a bus, on the tube, you could be in any city in the world, really, but the mixture of races and most people are permanently living. I mean, there are a lot of visitors, obviously, but most people are living permanently and wish to remain permanently in Britain. And they're the people, as John was saying, who want a better future for themselves, a better future for their families, and they want a peaceful existence. And certainly if you look at Parliament, I think the composition of Parliament, certainly in the House of Lords, is beginning to reflect the multicultural nature of our society. And we have representatives of the Muslim faith and of all faiths, and from people from all parts of the world who are permanently residing.
But Great Britain has always been, always had large immigrant populations. It goes back thousands of years, through the Romans, the Norman invasion, the Vikings. They all came.
Well, these have all been invasions, huh?
Well, those were invasions, and since then we have taken large communities, usually oppressed communities, from other parts of the world. And you know, in the run-up to the Second World War, we took a massive number of Jews from Central Europe. We go back, the Huguenots, and in the 50s and 60s, large groups came from the West Indies and the Caribbean.
But you wouldn't want anybody to change the way you want to live in your own country.
But obviously, with those people arriving, there will always be small changes, because it will reflect the makeup of the population. But those people are now all British, they're all integrated into British society. But you can walk around London, as Gloria has said, you will find synagogues and mosques and churches of all sorts of denominations, and more ethnic restaurants than you'll find in any other capital city in the world.
Right. Maybe New York.
No, more than New York. More than New York.
But interestingly enough, also, the fastest growing group in the United Kingdom is mixed race, of people establishing relationships between various groups and races, and therefore getting a melded culture, and that's part of the diversity of British life.
Right. I'm wishing you the best. I mean, I personally, I'm biased.
Come and try it, by the way.
Of course. I mean, I'm coming in January, and looking forward to seeing you then. And I'm thanking you very much for being on our show, القاهرة 360. Thank you very much. بتقدم بالشكر للبارونس هوبا نائب رئيس مجلس اللوردات البريطاني، والسيد جون سبيلر المتحدث أو نائب المتحدث حزب العمال البريطاني فيما يتعلق بالشؤون الخارجية، وسيد بوب وولتر عضو البرلمان البريطاني والذي يرأس المجموعة الداعمة لمصر. Thank you very much again. بشكركم، وأرجو أن اللقاء يكون وصل لحضراتكم مجموعة من الرسائل عن كيف يستشعر البريطانيون ما يحدث في مصر، سواء فيما يتعلق بما هو يجري على الأرض فعلا، أو إذا كان في طبعا بعض الكلمات اللي نقدر نستشفها من بين الكلام اللي فيه جزء كبير جدا دبلوماسي. أشكركم.